is there's so much timing on this stuff that seems to be synced up between.
We are rolling, by the way, just so you know.
Oh, good, nice.
But I love this start off, and it shows you're just in a mid conversation, and sometimes I just hit record.
Just hit record. Let's go.
Welcome in. I don't even know what episode this is. I'm supposed to know that, but it's only for my own organization. Mike Barrett and Pastor Mike Tatlock. We were just talking about, Lord's timing on stuff.
Yeah,
I've got some frustrating. Well, we all do. Frustrating things that timing doesn't happen when you think it is. And I was telling you a minute ago that my prayer habit is normally when the world goes quiet, which for me is when my wife goes to bed earlier than I do. When I climb into bed, that's when I normally will lay there on my back and kind of go into some kind of prayer, try to. And then the games you play with your prayer, especially if it comes to something you want badly, either business or relationship or even health for somebody else. But for me, it was always, my prayers lately have been pray hard about it and then say, but Lord, if it's not your will, and I've watched all these videos lately on will and how you know if something is the Lord's will, and so to the point where you can let it go and go to the whole even if you don't, it's not going to matter. So you try to do that thinking that he's going to go like a father figure, like say, okay, you've learned your lesson. Now I'm going to open the floodgates and here you go.
Yep.
Here's what you've been praying for.
Yep.
But even if that doesn't happen, which is the lesson and the things I always say about it. So. Anyway.
And no, I think that's funny. You were pressed. We were having a great conversation. And you started recording on that as we were unpacking life, which you and I do. Usually we sit here and you and I just do, support for each other and what's going on in our worlds and what's happening. We unpack and then at some point we'll press record and we get into a podcast. But I like that you pressed record just because that's what we do. We sit here and and I think like you just talk about how many of us are out there right now you're struggling, you've been asking God for help, and we know, okay, he's shaping me, molding me, characters refined through trials, and we know that, and we have to embrace that, when Paul or James says, count all joy when you face trials of various kinds, and you fast forward a couple of lines, he says, then you're not lacking anything, and it's like, okay, there's a gain through the pain, like all the cliches, we get that. But then the mystery of timing, that was where I was going, was like, okay, God, like when things don't fall into place and it seems illogical, it seems unfair, it seems almost too coincidental because there's some things in your life that we were just saying is like, this can't be a coincidence.
It's Groundhog Day.
Yeah, it's Groundhog's Day, yeah.
Over and over again. And so then you just kind of go, well, what does that mean? And I had a friend I was telling you who told me one time, he said, when something, like you just said, is so illogical, that it has to be from the Lord. And I hear that and I go, okay, I don't know what that means, but yeah, it sounds great. Sure. But again, I don't know. I don't know what to do with that. But I was not to change the subject because I'm not, but I was talking to a friend the other day, speaking of some of these kinds of things that, because here it is, we talk about Groundhog Day or whatever, things that don't come through the way you want them to. It starts to change your identity, starts to affect your identity. And I was talking to a friend the other day who was going through some business challenges, and I was just checking in with him, and he made the comment to me at one point. He said, I think he made a comment about having to go in the house and put on a great face and after being so disappointed. And I said, okay. I mean, a lot of guys, I think, I have to deal with that. And then he said, I'm probably getting a divorce. And I went, oh man. And then he had to go. So the next day I said, hey, tell me about I got to go, I guess. So we didn't get to talk about it. And then a couple of days later, I texted him and asked how he was. He said, hey, I'm at my mother-in-law's having dinner. Everything's going great. I'll talk to you later. And so I said, okay. And then I said, when I finally got to talk to him a few hours later, I said, how was dinner go? And he said, great. I said, well, how's things with your wife? Because you said you were probably getting a divorce. And he said, no. He said, I have had a couple business things come through, so I think it's going to work. And I said, what does that have to do with? But what it showed me was, I think a lot of guys are this way. Whereas my first inclination was to be critical and say, what does that have to do? closing a couple of business deals or getting a check you've been wanting, what does it have to do with your marriage? But then I realize he's taking all of that home, and it probably is damaging his psyche and his identity to the point where it was obviously greatly affecting his marriage. But just I could hear in his voice how it had changed him. And I don't know if that's necessarily a healthy thing, but I think we're all prone to that. And we're all, that can affect us all. And I don't know why I bring that up, but I bring that up in terms of, I guess, he was being authentic. And I said, I appreciate you being honest about it. And he goes, I know that's not right. I said, no, it's not. But I said, we're all, again, we're all human and we're all going to feel that. But I didn't really ask. I was going to say, is she happier now that you closed a couple deals? Cause that doesn't sound terribly healthy. I mean, in sickness and in health, that kind of covers business as well. But then I realized, I think it was more him. I think it was more the way he was viewing himself and his own identity and his own pride. And it, for some reason, having some success business-wise seemed to calm the waters, and it shouldn't. But I think as guys, that's how kind of messed up we can get.
Oh, gosh.
With who we are and how, the score we keep internally and how we view ourselves and the way we project feelings onto our wives in thinking she must not love me because I'm not having success right now in business.
Yeah.
And if I can, then she probably changed in his eyes and she probably really didn't change.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. It's funny because like in the world of psychology and counseling and even pastors, they always say, men are from Venus and women are from Mars, the other way around. Or you'll hear analogies like women are like spaghetti, men are like waffles, meaning that women, you look at a plate of spaghetti, it's all intertwined, everything's connected, whereas men, we compartmentalize like a waffle. And as much as I think there's some truth to some of that, I think for us as men, we're much more complex than that. And so we can say, what happens at work doesn't really affect me at home. I go, that's a tightrope. And I think for us as men, we like to carry the illusion that we're in that kind of level of control of those compartments. But I think at the end of the day, what happens in one square of our life at work, for instance, definitely impacts what happens at home. And, so for instance, if you are feeling disrespected, didn't get the promotion, have people not respect you at work, and you think you can just keep that in that box, that square, and then you come home and how your wife or kids respond to you, and you think that they don't connect, they connect way more than we think they do. So I think we're more complex beings than we're given credit for. Maybe we're just more in denial, or we pretend that those things don't overlap, but they really do.
For me, I think it's more, and I think in this is what I was kind of alluding to with him, is we hear things differently when we're feeling different ways about ourselves.
Oh,
so I think he started to interpret comments or a look or a word, and you get hypersensitive. Oh, then am I just not man enough? And she's probably going, what is he talking about? Not realizing that he's carrying over insecurities and failures in his eyes. I do it.
We all do it.
I know I do it.
We all do it. If everybody's honest, we all do that. And isn't it interesting because, you and I were going to talk about this, I think in this podcast, because of some really interesting conversations and feedback that we've both been getting, which is really awesome. We and just you and I both it seems like in the last few months it's increased even more. We know the podcast is reaching further and further, but the feedback we're hearing now is a lot of women are listening, and it's been super encouraging having women come up going, hey, we're listening to the podcast.
And I kind of stop at those times and go, ooh, did we say something? You know what I mean? I do that.
I know, like retract, like, I hope we didn't say, but we did kind of start this thinking, that we need something geared for men. And we also said this from the very beginning. I think it was podcast number 1. We said we knew that if we could impact men, it would bless women in relationships. And so we've always had women in mind, whether it was directly or indirectly. But now as we're unpacking things, I've heard from a lot of women who are going, no, directly, this is, but in this particular podcast, speaking of your buddy as a great segue to tee up this whole thing, the relationships that we're hearing, dynamics specifically between a man, a woman, husband, wife, and the cycles that we get stuck in. Mm-hmm. And you and I were just talking about this the other day, about how often we get stuck in a cycle based on how men have needs and how men perceive themselves and what they hope to get out of a relationship, what they think they want out of a relationship, i.e., say, for instance, respect. And then, women typically, they say, want to have love. And so there's an expectation of what that looks like for women. And we get stuck in a cycle in these relationships where, for instance, as a man, if I'm starting to feel really insecure, and my wife comes and wants to talk to me about something, i.e., she would have a request. If I'm insecure, I take her request as a reflection or a commentary on my inadequacy.
And how you're feeling in that day, in that moment.
Exactly.
Completely changes how you hear that comment.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Whereas if things are going great, you're like, oh, yeah, honey, let's sit down and talk. Where if they're bad, you throw a toaster against the wall. Well, not you, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Totally. Shut down.
Right.
Get upset, passive aggressive, whatever way we manifest it in our reaction to that comment or request or suggestion.
Because it affirms your current thought of yourself.
Absolutely. And then we're in that cycle. Well, then we probably aren't responding to her very lovingly. And then so she takes that. And so we get stuck in those cycles. And how many women have come up and said, gosh, I'm really excited for my husband. Let's get real specific. I'll give one real case in point. Whenever we do like premarital or I do marriage counseling, and I'm, by the way, I'm not like a marriage therapist, so I'm not going to pretend to be that. But over 30 years of being a pastor, I've walked with a lot of couples, my own marriage. And one of the examples you'll see is like, so women have a very deep need for security. And that's not a insult. That's nothing to say that she's not strong.
Weak, yeah.
It's not. In fact, women are very strong. And so security is, and it's not even just physical security, like we're walking down the street and, somebody, she wants to feel safe and wants you to feel macho and, and intervene and get in a fight on her behalf. Not that kind of silliness, but the sense of safety and security emotionally. What does that mean? Or what does it mean for her in a relationship? So oftentimes women want to feel secure and safe. And so when she expresses a request, an idea, that's her motive. But yet we as men can take it as, I'm not measuring up. She's speaking to an area and it feels like I'm being told I'm a failure, or I hear it as nagging. And so then we don't feel respected. And so we shut down or we get angry or whatever. And she was coming from a place of not saying you're not necessarily doing those things. It was her saying, this is how I want to feel love from you. Mm-hmm. And so it's an invitation that she's saying, she's communicating, trying to communicate. So like for women, for instance, who will come up and say, I want my husband in a men's Bible study. So I get asked that all the time. Ladies will ask me, hey, I want to get my husband in a men's Bible study.
Or just to get him to church.
Get him to go to church. And then guys hear the wife or girlfriend say, hey, we need to go to church. We want you to initiate. I want you to initiate. So it's not dragging feet. It's not pulling teeth. It's not Sunday morning going, hey, can we turn off football? Can we go to church? She wants there to not be a struggle or battle. She wants you to take the initiative in that and say, hey, let's go to church. Or for him to go, I'm going to go meet with some buddies and get into a men's small group or something like that where we study the Bible, we're focused on Jesus. And men hear that as massive, like, great, just one more thing I'm not measuring up. One more thing I'm not doing right. I'm disappointing her. She doesn't respect me. Well, here's the thing is, if a woman's core need is to feel safety, why she's asking for her husband to go to church, why she's asking for her husband to go to a men's small group or cohort, is because the ultimate thing that brings her safety is a husband that is trying to live his life like Jesus. Why? Because who's the safest person that's ever lived? It's Jesus. He's the safest person for men and women. I mean, there's no one that has ever lived than who Jesus was, and you feel loved by him, you feel secure by him and safe by him. And so that's a tall measure to expect us as husbands to be Jesus. Come on. Are you kidding me? Like you set that bar, I'm an instant failure. So I like, come on, but what she's really saying is a man who is pursuing Jesus means that he will over time reflect Jesus back to her, and that provides her the greatest sense of security. And so all she wants is a man that's moving towards Jesus. He is not perfection, but a process, a progress towards that. So that's why she's like, oh, my husband's wanting to go to church. It just, not that Christian men going to church, none of that means that we're perfect. Doesn't mean that there's not abusers out there who are living double lives and, they show up in church and all spiritual and at home they're just a monster. It's not saying, I'm not saying that extreme example, but she's like, wow, his life is his desires to become more like Jesus, and that desire, that's what she's asking for. And then we hear it as, well, we're not measuring up, and that's where our insecurities get involved. But she's really asking, I think, a pretty, I would say, reasonable request.
And it's funny you say this, and I know that we've talked about hearing from different women in our lives who are at church or around church who are listening to the podcast for, I think, number one, a little bit of insight into their man. And then what I'm hearing more, and my wife has even heard this, she's had people ask her for advice on how to get their husband or significant other, boyfriend, whatever, how to get them walking, or how to get them interested in church, or how to get them interested in the Lord. It doesn't always have to be church, but I know it's an easy measure for us, or at least interest level wise. And so that's what I've been hearing more about. Now you have we do a study on Wednesday nights, and the new book, Vintage Masculinity, has been terrific. And I think people are loving it. And that book is growing and growing in terms of what it means with a word that in the past few years, I think even is become maybe even among really progressive people, the word masculinity causes them to recoil a little bit and start to get their fangs out. And so today, knowing we were going to do a podcast today, I kind of just typed in, sometimes I just Google a few things to see what pops up. And I was typing in there, why men don't go to church, and how for women, how to get your husband more interested in church. And the first one, and I think I texted you this the other night, and I don't know if this is absolutely true, but I've seen this come up a lot of places, and it's like a survey. So I think women are seeing this. So when dad comes to church, 93% of families will follow. When mom comes to church first and initiates, only 17% of families will follow. So back to the masculinity thing. I also read this when I looked online today. The ideology of masculinity, this was saying, has replaced Christianity as the true religion of men. Now, the reason why this was interesting to me is because of your book and because of the way it paints this term of masculinity. We live in a society with a female religion and a male religion. Christianity of various sorts for women, and non-masculine men, and masculinity for men, which I don't really agree with. And I read enough articles. I don't know if they're written, they didn't have authors, so I don't know. One of them I know is written by a woman, and the other ones I don't know on the other ones. So if that is true, then what we should be asking is, who gets to define the term masculinity? And if it is a religion, could this demand that that the men get freaked out because anything might call into question their manhood? And could that be perhaps a reason? And we've said this before, that sometimes I think some men, maybe you have a church hurt when you were little, or you just wasn't interesting to you. But we've said this before, because you are going to church, because you are in a group, because you are asking questions, because you are yielding to a higher power, that doesn't mean that you have to get neutered. And I think that is where the vintage masculinity part and the definition that you have in the book that came out, that resets and redefines, and I think that was kind of your point, redefines what this vintage masculinity means. Whereas when I look it up and Google it, as far as, thinking that church is a woman's thing and guys, if you go there, you're weak. But what you've done is tried to redefine what masculinity means.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a book. Okay. So if you go into my office right now, I've got about a dozen of these same book, because I used to give it out all the time. It's a book that was written back in the 90s, I think it was, or early 2000s. And the title of the book was Why Men Hate Going to Church.
Yeah.
And I got like 10 or 12 of these on my shelf because I used to give them out. And
I might have looked at something today that was kind of like a preface to that or something online. I was looking around at stuff, and that might be where some of this stuff comes from.
It might have been, and I don't remember who the author was, so I wish I could give him credit right now. But I remember reading this book probably 20 years ago, and I was like, whoa, I didn't even know that this makes sense. And what he did, he correlated that if you go back to World War II, that when you think of what happened globally during the World War, you look at what happened in the U.S., where you had a lot of men that went to war. They went to battle, or at least they went into the military to serve their country, whether they served on the front line, whether they were serving, but they were deployed somewhere. What that meant was that and you see this even, you can parallel this where you saw women had to step up into the marketplace because men were leaving their jobs and factories to go fight on behalf of our nation, on behalf of fighting evil for the planet. So it left a vacuum in places of the marketplace, but it also left a vacuum in schools, and it left a vacuum of male leadership in churches. And this isn't necessarily bad. Just so this is not a dog on men or women, or it's just, it explains things. Is that in that vacuum, somebody had to step up. So women played a stronger role because they had to. They had to step up and lead a home because dad is gone to fight the war. They had to step up in business places, marketplaces. They had to step up in schools. They had to step up in churches. So what ended up happening was a lot of the leadership positions were now occupied, and women had to. That was the role that many women played to keep our country going, to keep these institutions, if you will, going and moving forward. Then the war is over. And men come back, and many of them come back to their jobs. But what happened was a lot of the roles that men took was not back in education. It was not back in the churches. So churches and schools were still led predominantly by women. And again, that's not a slam on women. That's they had to do that. That was what was required. That was their duty. At that time you had women who weren't fighting in battles. Again.
Right.
So you didn't have women deploying. Of course, some of them were. Of course they were, but not at the rate that we see today. And so all that to say, it explains why all of a sudden the culture and ethos of schools and churches became more female-centric. And so worship songs were being sung that were much more leaning towards connecting with women than men. Even though you would still have male pastors and preachers, some would argue and say, well, there was never really strong female preachers. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there was a lot more women leadership in general, especially amongst even younger ages in Sunday school, and you certainly see that in elementary schools, right? And so what happened was it just left this context where things started to appeal maybe more to women than to men. And then men just didn't come back to church. And so for a while
you think that's where it goes back to?
It's a piece.
That's interesting.
I think it's a piece. I don't think it personally fully explains it all, but I do think it's fascinating to see where we used to see roles of like men who were in education with young, boys in elementary and primary school. And all of a sudden that disappeared for decades. And now we're seeing a resurgence back where we have great educators in elementary age that are men. I think it needs to be both and. So I'm not trying to make a case for either or. I'm just explaining that when we go to the extremes, we oftentimes leave out the other side. And I think the pendulum swung towards an experience that church on Sunday mornings tended to appeal more to women than men. And hence there was a decline of men coming back to church. I also think the other thing is that men found bonding during the war. They found their brotherhood outside of church. So this is like your Elks Lodge and clubs. And so when men were coming back from battle, they needed to still find others who could relate to that. And where else were they finding that? So they were finding community and belonging outside of church, not Sundays. So all of that combined to this kind of exodus of men from church. I'm not saying men didn't go to church, but statistically, it was not a place that men were flocking to come back to.
Well, and it's funny, and so in some of the stuff I was reading, you took the words out of my mouth. If church is a woman's thing, then why are 95% of the senior pastors men?
Yeah.
And if the pastorate is a men's club, almost every other area of the church is dominated by women.
Right.
And so then you ask the question again, why then historically, maybe at least since then, have men had to be dragged to church? And vintage men, you can go to the Bible, Moses, Elijah, David, Daniel, Peter, Paul, you go right down the list. They were manly men. They risked everything. They fought. They spilled blood. Yeah. They spoke their minds. They stepped on toes. They were tough guys. And Jesus's strong leadership, this is what you talk about in the book a little bit too, blunt honesty, bold action, it mesmerized men. So I don't understand why now the stats in this country say only 35% of men go to church. And in Europe, it's much worse. But when you ask men how many believe in God, it's like 93%.
Right.
Believe in God, but you're only getting 35% of them into church. So when men now, and this again goes right back to what you just said, when men are needing spiritual sustenance, they go into the woods, they go on the river, they go to the garage, the workshop, they go mow the lawn for a while, they go watch sports, or they start following a sports team. And to go back to what you were saying, if they do it with somebody else or they do it with another group, it's because they're finding their identity there. They're finding relationship there, or somebody who can relate to them.
Yep. And I think men to have, and again, this is kind of hard because we don't want to stereotype every man or woman this way. Because I know a lot of women.
That's why I'm throwing stats out.
Well,
I don't want to,
because they're real.
Yeah.
These are real numbers. But I think that men also, many men have a kinetic faith in the sense that when you go to church and you hear about what faith can look like, I think that men are looking for places of action. They're looking for places to step in, and they want to be kinetic with their faith. They want to put action to it. And women do too, but I think predominantly for men, I would say this, that a lot of men going to church is hard because it's like all I'm doing is being reminded of who I'm not and what I should be. And it can feel like I'm going to church and I'm getting a dose of failure. I'm not measuring up, I'm not doing enough. And I think we as men carry that more than we probably are honest with ourselves. And so do I insert myself into a situation where I'm going to be reminded of how I'm not measuring up or I'm not doing enough? And so sometimes, depending on the church you go to, you can walk away going, do I really want to go and get beat up again? Do I really want to go? And that's not true of every case, but I think that again, these are all just factors and elements that can be tipping points of why a guy doesn't go to church. And I think guys are looking to belong and connect, and I think that's another piece of it.
Well, and I need to affirm you in this, because a lot of the stuff I kept reading today about churches and some of the stats I was throwing out, I kept thinking, that's not our church. That's not the church you lead. And you guys and your church that you lead is exploding, and there are a lot of men there. And you guys are purposefully, you have a great men's discipleship, and you guys have different things for guys to go to and retreats and things. And this thing that we do on Wednesday nights, we do a thing Wednesday morning. And I know some guys go, how do I have the time for that? You do. But a lot of the trends I was seeing and a lot of the issues I was seeing and reading about today, I kept thinking, you've cracked the code on that. You really have. And I know that you deflect and you want to, and everybody gets credit for sure. But that's the church that I'm proud enough to call home. Is our church isn't like that. It's men are comfortable there. And when I look around, and by the way, it's just like lately, it's it's just packed, and they're bringing in chairs every week. And, if you don't know our church, it's, a pretty new building, and people ask me about it all the time. There's a buzz about it. And I think a lot of that buzz, it's men talking about it. And I think that's unusual. I don't think that's normal right now in the church. So kudos to everybody at the church for doing this, and you and your leadership, and then the book you did in Vintage Masculinity. You're onto something, because it's working for guys. And I think in Christianity in the U.S. and in churches, this is the blueprint on how you get men back to church, and why for you ladies, that you don't have to grab your husband by the ear or guilt him and drag him out of the house and get him to go to church on Sunday mornings. And I'm not saying you have to go to church to be a good follower of Jesus. I'm not saying that, but for me, I know how it works for me. It's my favorite thing to do. And when I was little, I dreaded it. I didn't want to go to church. I mean, it was like, oh gosh, man, the NFL's coming on in a little bit, and I didn't want to go. And now I can't get there early enough. I just want to be there. And I know a lot of guys like that. A lot of men like that. In fact, when I get there early, there's a group of 8 to 10 different guys who come, and they're kind of like me. They get there early, and that's my time with them. And I lap the room and I talk to them. So when I read all this stuff today about the fact that why are, 35% of men and all this stuff I was throwing out, and how women are having to drag men to church, I'm like, they're not coming to our church. And I'm not sitting here trying to say that we've solved everything, but the blueprint is there, because guys are feeling it. And even the Wednesday night thing we do with 40 guys or whatever, and those aren't guys that were from my circle or my network of friends. There are a lot of guys I didn't know, but man, that thing's cooking. And we got guys showing up each week just to go through the book and just to be there and talk. And we've talked on this podcast so much about cohorts and the power of that. And that's what this is. And that's what we're talking about. And I think the way that you have done it, and the way that your sermons go, and some of the others that preach at the church, and just the overall feeling there, is men don't feel threatened. They don't feel beat down. And I know some guys who want to hide at church. And so that's where religion appeals to them, and ritual, where you don't have to, you just go and check it off the list. And I did that. But that's not I don't think that's what it's about. We're obviously, the way we talk about things, it's much more relational, and trying to push you into being in an authentic relationship and a friendship. But and I know, every pastor is going to take criticism from time to time. I know you get a little bit here and there, but whatever you're doing, man, as far as attracting men to church, which doesn't sound like that's normal right now in our country, and in our faith, it's working.
Oh, I appreciate it. That's encouraging. Well, you're in your front seat to that, because you're making it happen. You're part of why that culture is what it is.
Well, I think all the guys at the church are.
Well, that's the thing. And I look at it and I go, I think this is what guys are really hungry for. I really do. Oh my
gosh, yes.
I think they're hungry for authenticity.
Yes.
They want authenticity when it comes to masculinity. And because I talk with guys who they come to church and they're like, you know what I love about here? The authenticity. And I think there's something weird where guys want authentic, where it's like, man, we can be real, we can be honest, we can talk about our challenges. I think guys are tired of being demonized by culture. Just tired of it.
It's one of the main reasons we started this.
It is one of the main reasons.
A few years ago when we talked about it, it was really bad.
Absolutely.
And it's corrected a little bit.
And I hope that we're going to start seeing some more of that correction. But we talked about this early on, but you even look at how it's the caricature in TV shows. When it was back in the 50s, dad was kind of honored at home, respected. And I'm not saying we have to go to the stereotypes where wife is wearing the apron in the kitchen. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about the way that dad was honored, respected by the kids, by the wife. And then you fast forward to kind of moving towards sitcoms,
the Homer Simpson,
the Homer
Peter
Simpsons.
Griffin, and I know. That's a great comparison to think about.
It is,
because that's now how they're seen.
That's it.
Yeah.
And guys are tired of going, why am I seen that way? And were there things that could have been corrected in culture with women? Of course. Women don't have to be just relegated to the kitchen, and there were some extremes there that needed to be corrected. But what I'm saying is, like, what happens is we swing these pendulums to the extreme, and then all of a sudden now men are being portrayed in commercials and TVs where they're just a third child to the wife. That's how men are being portrayed. And you even see that. And then I think oftentimes women adopt that same mentality to their husbands. I've heard women say that. They talk of their husband as if he's just one of the kids. And we know as dudes, we always will never lose our childhood type stuff. And we have this sort of psychological part where we want our wives to be nurturing like mom is. I get that. And you see that when men are sick versus when our wives are sick, and we want a little bit more of that TLC, and we want to be mommed a little bit and mothered. And I get all that.
And the moms are always, I don't have time to be sick.
Yeah, right. I mean,
and they're right.
Yeah,
because they do so much. We'd fall, and we'd fall apart without them.
We would totally fall apart. The family
would fall apart without them. There's no doubt about that.
Absolutely. And moms are like superheroes, and they really are. They have a whole nother level. They got kids crawling all over them, husbands. And I mean, it's amazing what moms and wives are. And I actually think that's a really cool picture, the way God created. A lot of the stuff is jacked up because of sin, and then sin manifests in culture. But if you go back to the Garden of Eden, when God created Adam and Eve, and Adam was a man of strength and a man also of compassion. You know, when God created man first, he gave him the imperative command to cultivate, nurture, be strong, a protector, but also one who has a tender side. I really think that's what God created man to be. And then even when God created the helper, is the word in Genesis, and in the Hebrew, the word helper for the wife, for Eve, is the strength of God. And so from day one, God created them to be a powerhouse as a team. And that's what marriage is. And the Bible says they're one flesh. And, you know, what does that mean? And then everything else gets in the way of that. But I think God created men and women to both be strong and both to be interdependent. That's the way marriage was designed to be, that there's strength in both the husband, strength in the wife. They're interdependent, not codependent and not independent, but interdependent is what a healthy marriage relationship looks like, where they both draw from the strength of each other and the uniquenesses of a man, the uniquenesses of a woman, and they are better together. And I think that's because when God created a man and woman, that when they're together functioning at their best, it's actually a reflection of who God is in his nature. So women can be extremely strong and should be, and men can be the same way. But the point is, culture, society kind of just swung that pendulum and it cut a swath across men as being idiots, being unintelligent, being, just a kid that's needing all this attention. And so we have this deficit of men who are feeling that way. So again, it comes back to your question of when a wife is asking a man to maybe step up into something, we hear it as nagging. We hear it as reinforcing that I'm a failure and I'm not enough. And so then that just buries us in our insecurities.
So what do you say when you get asked the question? And I know you get it a lot. And I say this because, again, my wife was asked this a couple of times, what do I do? How do I get my husband connected? How do I because a lot of them are afraid. And this is where I feel for the women in this, because they're like, I'm not even sure how I ask him, because he's going to take it that he's not enough. Yep. They get that.
Yep.
They understand that we're going to feel that way, especially if they know their husband is shut down a little bit and struggling. And then they go to church and they see these men's groups that are hugging and talking about things, and they're thinking, gosh, I wish he had that. And I hear that a lot from, I wish my husband had that in his life. And I have had some good friends who their wives have said to me, I wish he had a group or a group of guys that he could talk to, but he's so busy with work, and then he comes home and the kids, and we have sports, and he doesn't have time for it. What do you say, though, to the women who come to you and ask, how do I get my husband tracking? How do I get him interested? Can I ask it? Does it take other guys? Which I found that, and that's the thing. And that's why I think I've had in some of the guy friends that I have, the wives have kind of asked that, and I'm sensing they're saying, would you do it? Will you ask him?
Oh, yeah.
Because he's not going to hear it right if I ask him.
Totally.
So can you maybe see if he will come to an event or a retreat? Or, I mean, we've been on some really cool events, be it a FCA fly fishing or hunting or whatever, or the men's retreat that the church does. There are all those things that men can do to be a part of, and even some stuff online, which I've talked about, the morning devotionals that I do with another friend, and it takes 5 minutes. And even though we don't see each other as often as we would like, and I've got a friend in Florida who listens to the podcast now, and he's going through a struggle, and he's like, I don't have any guys down. He's heard us talk about the power of cohorts and the power of these groups. And he's like, I came down here for work a few years ago, so I don't really have my network of guys here, and I don't know what to do, and I'm struggling, and I need to talk, and I don't want to talk to my wife because it's just more of the same stuff she already knows. I'm not getting anywhere. I'm spinning my wheels. Back to my question, what do you say when women come to you and ask how, and this is for women who are listening to this, what are some of the steps, or what are some of the advice that you would give to them to hopefully start their husband on that track that we all know would help them greatly?
I would say prayer, of course, and that always gets thrown out. But I do really believe that there's a lot in prayer. And to a wife that's listening, that's going, well, I've been praying. Keep praying, because there has to be something that God does in a spiritual realm, that prayer. So prayer is a piece of it. And again, you're probably going, I am doing that. So keep praying. 2 is there's not a problem. Men respond to invitation. Men respond to invitation. I have seen men respond in the last year to guys who are like starting cohorts. And I was just talking with a good friend yesterday who's a fireman. And he said, yeah, I'm using the book. I've invited some guys at my firehouse, and they're like, they're responding to him. They're opening up, they're sharing, they're showing interest, they're pressing in more. And I think that subtle invitation is powerful for men. Men want to be invited by other men. So for a wife to go, man, I really want him to, it's not a problem. It doesn't always work out, but for her, they come to me. I invite guys all the time because a wife asked me. I have no problem. I'll partner with you because I get that. And so I can't do that for everybody, but I've had wives come up and say, hey, would you invite him to X, Y, and Z? And sometimes I can. Sometimes the request is like, I don't know if I can. Sometimes it's, hey, can you take my husband out one-on-one? I'm like, I can't do that with everybody. There's not enough time. But yeah, I'll invite him to the next thing. I'll invite him to a small group, or I'll at least encourage him to join one. So men inviting men, and if a wife, mom, girlfriend is proactive in helping that, facilitate that, that's a way that could happen. I would also say this, that I heard a pastor one. This is it's going to be a little provocative, but I'm going to say it anyways. I have heard, again, going back to women want to feel safety and security. And what do women do when they feel safe and secure? They give more of themselves away. So when men are like, I want intimacy with my wife, I want sex with my wife, I'm like, how safe does she feel around you? Does she feel safe and secure that she wants to give more of herself to you? Because she won't open her life up. She won't be vulnerable. She won't go to that deeper level unless she feels safe around you. And she wants to, but it comes back to that safety thing. That's really important to acknowledge. And so I've told, because I heard a pastor said it one time. He said that when a guy reads his Bible or prays with his wife, it's an aphrodisiac. It's foreplay.
You're right.
It's foreplay. Now, again, it's a provocative statement because here's what's going to happen. I'll get pushback. I'm not saying that guys should do that just so they can have sex and have ulterior motives, because women can sniff that out fast.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you're just doing this because you want to jump into sack tonight. Okay. That's not what I'm saying.
Transactional at that point.
This is a disclaimer. I'm not saying, guys, do that so you get some action from your wife that night. That's not what I'm saying. I'm also recognizing that a lot of women have trauma, in maybe sexual trauma, and that's where things get really complicated, and we have to be really careful with that as husbands. But what I'm saying in general, the principle is that if a wife feels safe and secure, and the safest she feels is when a man is pressing closer to God, because God and Jesus is the ultimate safety. And so as men are genuinely, without ulterior motives, genuinely pressing into God in faith, and that can show like an interest in going to church or an interest in meeting with other guys who are talking about Jesus, she begins to go, wow, I'm feeling safer. Again, generally. And then out of that, there's more of her that wants to, and not just sexually, she wants to give herself just more of herself to him. And so here's the irony of that. Men want that. We want our wives to give more of themselves to us. We long for her to do that. So that's the cycle we get stuck in. So one thing that a wife can do to stack the odds in her favor is to encourage him, not nag him. And I know sometimes a request is not always nagging, but encourage him in the things he is doing. Build that up now. He might be not doing everything you want him to do, but man, celebrate it, encourage him in the things he is doing. Put some deposits in there. Put some chips in his account of that you are seeing. Even if it's little things like, hey, I love the way that you are with the kids. Hey, when you read the book, the story to the kids last night, I just want you to know that that's so awesome. I love that. And put some chips in the account so that when you do come and ask, you're not asking out of a deficit where all he's heard is more what he's not doing. I'm just saying, some wives, your accounting's off and you have not put enough chips in the account. So now when you make a request or you're asking to do something, there's just not much there.
Because for a lot of guys, when they hear that, and I've brought this up before, but if they hear some of that, it builds if they think their wife respects them, that is huge for them. That builds them up and gives them confidence, and that will lead to self-confidence, and then they can go out and do this kind of thing. But I know, and I've seen tough marriages at times where you just turn out to be roommates and you're both kind of harboring resentment for what you think your wife thinks of you. And you might be way off on that. Yeah. And usually I think you are. And therefore there's just, I would imagine, and you know this because you do premarital and stuff, the communication piece is so massive. And for guys, I know that, like some of the things I remember, and my wife will say this too, is like, even if we leave each other a note in our car, which I don't do often enough. I used to do it all the time. And I'm sitting here thinking about these things I can do better, like we all should. But there's those little things that if you're having trouble with communication, I would say that even for wives and some of the asking, how do I get my husband tracking better? And if it is, if you're imagining that conversation, and you're already going, well, he's going to take it like I'm nagging, or he's going to take it like he's not enough, then write it. Write it in a Post-it note, maybe, or a text, I guess, but a handwritten note for some reason I think is a little more personal in this case and a little more affirming. And I know some of the notes I kept when I've gotten those. I still have them. And that's where it's over. I think the value of it is greater than a text. Is old school piece of paper and pen sometimes holds a little more value, and you can go back and look at it. So those are big things. And the things you're talking about are important things as far as, because we are different, man. I remember a conversation we had I think it was early in our marriage, and I was kind of, and this again, you went provocative a minute ago, so I can too now, but we were having a conversation one night, and I was saying, what are some things that really like do it for you? Like things that turn you on.
Great. What a good conversation.
Kind of asking and she said, and of course I have things in my own mind, which of course are a little different, but she said, and she said, well, and I'm expecting this bold answer. She chewed on that question for a minute, and she said, like when you unload the dishwasher, I see you with the kids, or you're out in the backyard with the kids, you spend time with them, help them with homework. And I said, what? That was nowhere near. I remember that conversation because then she said, well, what about you? And I said, never mind. Never mind. Me too. That's exactly what I was thinking. But I remember that conversation, and I went, wow, we are different in those ways. And in a good way. Yeah. But it opened my eyes to the fact that I didn't know that. I really didn't. And it was funny. I didn't let on at that moment. It was funny. I did honestly just say, "Oh yeah, me too. That's great." And never mind. She said, "No, you weren't going to say that." No, that's what I was going to say. But I went, "Wow, okay." I was off on that one a little bit, but it also
you were going to bring up the Princess Leia fantasy.
Yeah, costumes, the whole thing. I had all role play, and it was like, nope, that's not it. I got to go play with the kids more. But hey, it's accurate, and she was honest about that. So there are those ways that I think, and for guys that again are feeling beaten down and whatnot, and having the conversations and the communication piece is massive.
Well, I think that what's so good about this is one of the things we didn't talk about, but I'm going to sneak it in right now because I think this is key. Is at the end of the day, we're talking also about how do you build intimacy in a relationship, in your marriage, and it's interesting when I do. I've noticed a trend. Typically, what I'll do when I do like Blazer chapels, I'll do maybe a 2-week, which could be anywhere from like 3 to 5 games, series on dating, relationships, and marriage.
That's huge.
And that's when I notice everybody leans in. And that's when like the side conversations, hey, can I give you a text later tonight? Can I reach out to you tomorrow? It's like, this is where the rubber meets the road in terms of people are going like, hey, how does this stuff really play out? Who's giving this advice? And the biggest questions I get asked are around intimacy. Intimacy in marriage, and how do you build that? And so the illustration I use is bands, like elastic bands. So whether it's a rubber band or you've used workout bands, and I've done this in chapel in the locker room. I'll go over and grab some elastic workout bands, and I'll put 2 chairs back to back, and that represents the dream. We get married, and we're dreaming of being together and intimacy. But then what happens is life starts to pull you apart. Work, kids, stresses, could be health issues, just whatever it is. And all of a sudden those chairs start moving apart. And then what happens is if you don't have elasticity in your intimacy that keeps pulling you back, you'll wake up 10 years, 20 years down the road, and you'll be so far apart, you'll go, what happened? And it's the gradual things, and even good things like having kids are awesome. They're a blessing. But we all know when you start having kids, intimacy changes, connection changes. So elasticity is the key to intimacy, so that as you're going through life, whatever tries to wedge you apart, you're springing back. But not one band is going to do it. All the pressure on one band. So I give, and this is in the book, by the way, Vintage Masculinity, but there's 5 types of intimacy elasticity we need. And the first one is intellectual, which is conversation, sharing, talking, communication, right? What you did with Shelly was awesome. Like, hey, what's your turn on, or what gets you going? That's healthy, mature marriage, because and it can be about talking about ideas and dreams. So you need intellectual intimacy, but that can't be the only band. You need recreational intimacy, which is go have fun together. You got to have breaks, even if it's, it could be the little things. You're like, I don't have time for this. Well, reality is this. Let me tell you this. You're going to manage time where you're putting something in your marriage, or you're going to be managing time when the marriage fell apart. So you got to put time somewhere. Why not be proactive? And so it could be anything from, hey, we just went and ran errands together on Friday. That's it. Or Saturday morning, we went to Costco and we ran. You go, well, that's not romantic. That's intimacy, because you're actually building. It's better to have more smaller things than just like once a year we go do a trip together. It's a lot of pressure on that one trip. You can have the trip, but find some ways that you are enjoying laughing together, going to a movie, dinner, whatever your thing is, whatever it is.
I'll give away too much here, and my wife will probably get mad at me, but she recalls a couple times when she has talked about memories of a really tight, intimate, flirtatious, almost foreplay type flirtatious.
Yes. Yep.
She's talking about Home Depot.
Exactly.
Being in Home Depot with me, and I'm, being handsy or whatever and having fun and laughing with her. This is probably back early kids or no kids, but those memories stick in her mind of that. So it doesn't take like a trip to the Bahamas necessarily.
No.
And she used that example. I went, okay, that's a great example. So, and at those moments now, or when I have not probably been as in the moment or attentive, I'm just drifting and I'm thinking about something else, and I have to remember to be more in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Being in those moments, and that's a band. That's an elasticity band, is those moments. Another one is, and I think this is an important one, emotional intimacy. And that what that is the ability to sit in the other person's space. So if my wife comes home and she's angry, can I join her in her anger? I don't have to live there, because sometimes we need to pull each other out of those spaces. But can I empathize, sympathize? Can I validate? And yeah, that would, piss me off too. Or like, I totally can see why you're upset. And or joyful. Like she comes home and I'm excited. Like this thing happened. Do I share in that same excitement, or do I just crash her party and rain down on it and not be present in that moment? Right. I'm busy on my phone, or I'm this, and I'm like, I missed it. So emotional intimacy is a third rubber band of bringing us back together. And we both need that, not just her. I need that too. If I come home and I have a hard day or I have a good day, can she sit in that space with me? That's intimacy. A fourth one is spiritual intimacy, which is what we're talking about. Going to church together, praying with her. And it doesn't mean you have to have these long, crazy, it's not about what you say. It's just the intention. It's asking her questions like, what do you think about God? Or what are you learning? Or what are you struggling with? It's maybe reading something together and then sharing it with each other. But that spiritual intimacy is a big, big piece of a rubber band. And then the last one is the physical intimacy, which is everything from holding hands, walking through the mall, to full on having a great time of sex. And I think not taking that too serious either, and, but those are the 5 bands that what ends up happening in marriages is we put all the pressure on one of those, and no marriage can survive with just one of those bands. It stretches it too much and it'll snap, and then it's not enough. So if you build all of those, and so I think my advice, because you asked the question of what can you tell wives?
Yeah.
Have that conversation. Sit down with your husband and actually say, here's the 5 bands of elasticity. Use this as a conversational tool and say, I heard this podcast. They're talking about 5 bands of elasticity. Make an intimacy plan. Actually talk and go, hey, what are some things? And ask your husband, how would you like to have more intimacy in our relationship? Hear him out. And now you're creating a conversation where both are sharing ideas. That's where then you can insert.
Yeah. I was going to say, you're building a foundation.
You're building that foundation, and like for me, I'm a physical touch guy, words of affirmation. And I remember one time, this is just a funny story, because you talked about the Home Depot. Our kids were crazy. Like, I forget what age they were. They were like probably 9, 10, 11, somewhere there, 12. We went to Sun River, and we had a weekend away that we were staying at some rental house. And it's like at that age, you're always trying to sneak in some time of intimacy. And my wife has health issues, which we've talked about here. And so that can make it really tough. And that's a whole nother podcast of like, how do you be a husband when your wife is going through chronic illness? Mm-hmm. It's really tough, right? That impedes a lot of intimacy of all those 5 bands. Anyways, we go away and we're with the kids, and the kids were in bed sleeping, and it's still like, 11 o'clock at night. And I like, oh, there's a hot tub outside. And I look at my wife. I'm like, hey, let's go fool around in the hot tub. She's like, yeah, let's go. So we strip down, and we're downstairs. The kids are way upstairs in a whole other side of the house. We're downstairs, and we strip down and we jump into the hot tub, and we just have this great married time, right?
Yeah.
This is, God created this. It's beautiful. It's good. It's fun. And so then we're like, okay, we're sitting out in the hot tub and we're having a blast. And then we go back to get in the house, and the door's locked. Door is locked. Our clothes are on the inside. And all we got is a towel, and that's it, nothing. And so the back door is locked. So I'm like, well, I'll just go around the front door. Front door's locked. We're now locked out of the whole house with nothing but towels. And I'm like, I don't know how we're going to get. So I go around the door. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to have to embarrass myself and knock on the door and wake one of the kids up to come open the door. Pounding on the door. Kids are sound asleep.
They're not even hearing it.
They're not even hearing nothing. The neighbors across the street are like, lights are coming on. Like,
it's a naked guy trying to get in there.
Exactly. What's going on in the neighbor's house across the street? And I could tell they were looking over and hearing somebody pounding on the door. And I realized, like, we're not getting in the house. And so I look up and I go, oh man, on the second floor, there's a patio deck. And I think the screen door is open. And I'm like, but I got to get up there. So I looked at my wife and I said, you got to help me climb up to the second, and I'm like, get this bike that was on the side of the house. I get up halfway. I'm like putting leverage on her shoulder. I'm standing on top of her.
I hope this was in the summer, by the way, because it gets cold over there in the winter.
Yeah.
That would have been nasty.
Oh, yeah. It would. No, this was summertime.
I just got in a hot tub
spring.
And
I think it was
rode
spring.
out the night.
I think it was spring. And I'm standing with nothing but this towel on, and she looks up, and she had a great view.
That's great.
So I'm trying to scale up the side of the house.
Spider-Man.
And I Spider-Man into the patio upstairs. I get into the house. Here's the whole point. I open the door. She walks through the front door, and we both fell on the ground laughing.
Yeah.
Just laughing. Like,
it's a memory. You're still telling the story.
It's a memory to this day. And I'm like, so all that to say is you can try to make the most perfect plans. And there's never going to be a perfect plan. But you can be intentional and be as intentional as you can. Some of the seasons are hard. You're going through maybe grief and loss because a family member's died. Maybe you're going through just health issues, work stress. There's a ton of stuff that wants to wedge in our intimacy. And you have to practice and be intentional with those 5 bands of intimacy. And in whatever season, they're going to look different in different seasons. But I think like in that, so if wives are listening, try to have the conversation around how do I get a man, my husband, more interested spiritually. Well, frame it in a bigger conversation. That's why I went through all of that, was to try to give tools. And maybe there's a husband and wife listening right now that now go on a date night. This is what I do with every premarital. I tell them, go on a date night, take these 5 bands of intimacy and go, what does this look like for each other? What does intimacy, physically look like to him? And then she shares the same thing. Go back and forth on all of those, and then go, what are we going to try to do with all the interruptions, with all the chaos, with all the busyness? Kids got sports. We got to run around to this, and we got this, and we got that. I get it. Try to make an intentional plan, and then know it's never going to go perfect. Give yourself some grace and laugh. But I think in all of that, this is a whole conversation, is a great place to talk about the importance of that spiritual piece.
That's interesting. I mean, in predicting how you would answer that question, because I don't know if we really talked about that, as we mentioned that as just with the podcast and how it's been a tool, and a lot of guys take different things from it than the ladies do. But the one thing that I'm hearing that the women have been taking from it is, how do I get my guy more walking that and tracking where he wants the faith? I'm not sure. Now it all makes sense the way you framed all that, because that does make sense, all of it. There is no magic answer, in other words.
No.
It's a foundational approach and a kind of a holistic, kind of the entire picture approach.
Yeah.
Which sounds like a lot of work. I don't think that it is. I mean, it's an investment, and it's a wonderful investment.
Mm-hmm. And then cheerlead it. Both just need to cheerlead, not nag. So after you have this conversation, if he shows any resemblance of trying, or there's things that's there, like, just really champion it and say, hey, this means a lot when you did this. This means a lot when you did that. And I think that goes a long ways of putting those chips in the bank account.
And the other side of this is, before we wrap up, is guys that are listening.
Mm-hmm.
And because some guys listen who aren't necessarily all in or tracking, but know how happy that would make her.
Yeah.
You want to do give her the ultimate Christmas present. I mean, this is it. And she's not only going to respect you more as a man, not that she doesn't, but we talked about how they're kind of wired, and how the different things that give them that respect for you.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things you can do.
Right.
And if she's wanting you.
That's it.
And everybody does. You can sense that if she's wanting you to start tracking a little closer.
Yeah.
Start figuring out what you can do.
The last thing before we wrap up too, because this is, I think would be maybe helpful, is because I learned something in our marriage that I bet every married couple struggles with. Because wives also want to feel the priority. They want to feel that they're number one. They're not second to the job. They're not second to the kids. They're not second to your hobbies. They want to feel they're the priority. And that's right. They should feel that way. Here's the dilemma, though. I just discovered this a few years ago. There's so many things. I'll use my marriage as an example. My wife knows all the things I say yes to. She knows those things. For instance, if I'm going out of town, obviously she knows I said yes to that. Because I said yes to a golf trip, or I said yes to a hunting trip, or I said yes to a conference, or whatever. she knows all the yeses. If hey, I'm going to go hang out with the guys, or I'm going to go do this and work stuff, and I say all those yeses, if there's so many yeses that I say yes to, she begins to feel like, is he going to say no to any of that so he can say yes to me? It feels like it's out of balance. Like he's saying so many yeses to things that I don't know if he's saying yes to me, making me the priority. So women actually want their husbands to say more no's because that's a value to her that we're saying yes to her, that she's the priority. Here's the problem. And I think women, I'd like you to hear this. My wife has no idea all the no's I've said to, because I don't walk through the front door and go, I am here. Husband has arrived. Scoreboard. Here's all the no's I said to today to say yes. Like, no, we don't come and flaunt that. So she has no idea that probably that day I said no to 5 things, maybe a hunting trip, fishing trip, golf outing, because I was saying yes to her. But I don't show that in front of her. And I've had so many couples when I say it go, you're right. We actually and I would say this for both. We both don't know how many times we've actually made the other person the priority, because all we do know is the times we've said yes to other things. And so this is where communication has to come in, and being able to talk about that and say, even, honey, I just want you to know, like, I've said no to 5 things, not to like make you feel guilty, not to make you sit here and mope around the house. Like, just go play golf then if you're going to sit here and rub it in my face, right? It's not about that. It's not about scorekeeping, but it is about letting her know that I've said no because I'm saying yes to you a lot more than it looks.
That's a great way to put it, rather than put it on the scoreboard, as you said. It's great. And I wanted to do one that was more, because we've heard so much of it lately from ladies who have been listening. So this was, and it always works out this way. That was the design kind of going in, but it turned out I think a lot of guys needed to hear this too. And I need to go home and kind of meditate what we talked about, because it's all good stuff and nobody has it all figured out. Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah,
we can work on it.
That's for sure.
Well, tell us once again where we can get the Vintage Masculinity book, because we referred to a lot of that today.
Yeah. There's a whole section in there on the role of we didn't even talk about other pieces on roles of husbands. And super cool. The other day I had a wife come up to me and she said, hey, my husband's reading this and he's starting to do things for me in our relationship. And he referenced, well, I read it in the book and I want to try more. And she just said, thank you.
Oh, wow. It's got to make you feel good too.
Yeah. And we did. We wrote this knowing that was the hope, that it would have a ripple effect in the relational circle of men, their kids, their wives, their families, friends, all that stuff. So that was cool. But you can get a copy. The best way to do it is reach out to Grace Chapel, and you can just reach out to our office, request it. If you're listening somewhere, we'll mail it to you. Just request it. We have people who are doing that right now. It's cheaper if you get it from us because it's $20. There is a website we're working on right now, but it's going to cost a little bit more because they manufacture it. When you buy one, we buy them in bulk, so we can get them a lot cheaper.
Right.
$20, but we'll actually ship them to you. So please just reach out to Grace Chapel in Wilsonville, our church. If you just send an email to us, you can go on our website and say, hey, I'd like to get a copy of Vintage Masculinity. We have our administrative team is all set up to be able to get that for you, to do that transaction, and we can ship it out to you. Or you can stop by. If you're in the area, you can stop by anytime during the week and pick one up, which is what a lot of people are doing right now.
I'm not sure if I asked you this, but are you doing an online version?
We are working on an online where it'll be digital.
Yeah.
And then it'll be on the app.
Oh, great. The VP app.
Mm-hmm. It'll be on the VP
By the
app.
way, this podcast is also available on the Vertical Pursuit app. It's in the App Store, and you can download it for free. It's got so much stuff, including the podcast, but it's got the VP book too. Mm-hmm. And then soon, that's good to hear. That's why I wanted to ask you. This book is going to be on the app.
This book will be digitalized, and then it'll be on the app.
And we're also on, the Apple, what do they call it? iTunes.
Yep.
I mean, I guess it's iTunes. It's on your phone, where your podcasts are located, and also on Spotify. So we appreciate you spending time with us, ladies and men, and we will see you next time on Vertical Pursuit. We invite you to subscribe to our podcast, comment, or message us. And check out our website at verticalpursuit.org. Download the VP app
and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.